In the 3rd year of his marriage to Philip, he was stimulated by the highly compatible Omega and entered a susceptible period. I rushed to the scene but was turned away. Across the wall, he sneered in a low voice, "Sean, you're just a beta. The beta who can never appease the alpha." 1. The hand that pushed the door froze in place. Inhibitor. Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted. "Travis, send the wife back immediately." I suppressed the bitterness, turned around and walked away quickly. When we were about to reach the elevator, I suddenly stopped and said, "You don't have to send me off. Just go back and look after him." Travis paused and followed me into the elevator stubbornly. "Don't worry, ma'am. We have a new type of suppressant in the lounge. Besides, Philip's orders are to take you home, please." I pursed my lips and walked towards the parking lot in silence. As soon as I sat in the passenger seat, my pockets began to vibrate rapidly. Philip is buying our family's shares. When I opened my phone, I saw the message from my father, which instantly made me understand why Philip, who had always been with me during the sensitive period after marriage, suddenly resisted today. I lowered my head and clenched my white knuckles around my phone. It was as if I saw Philip standing in front of my door 3 years ago, holding a financing plan. 3 years ago, the funding chain broke and no one in the circle came to help. Everyone was waiting for this behemoth to fall. I followed Philip and watched him return home frustrated after one drinking party after another, squatting in front of a roadside trash can and pounding his fists on the ground. I was angry and anxious, so I asked a friend for his bank card number and transferred all my savings of many years to him. Philip is not a person who cannot humble himself. The next day he asked me to thank him in person and even wrote me a promissory note. Unfortunately, it's just a drop in the bucket. So I did the most daring thing I've ever done. I told my parents, "Philip and I have been secretly dating for 4 years, and he is the one I want in my life." My father scolded me for being drugged, and I would not turn back until I hit the wall. I knelt down and retorted, "Dad, Mom, Philip is not that kind of person. He promised to marry me when his family gets better." After some persuasion, the parents agreed to meet Philip. I excitedly approached Philip and said, "Although my company cannot be included in the list, the current situation is special. Would you consider cooperating with us?" The next day, Philip came to visit with a financing proposal. It went surprisingly smoothly, and my father said the plan was perfect. But he made a condition. "I want you to hold a banquet with Sean right now. Invite relatives and friends of both sides to announce your relationship and sign an agreement." Philip turned to look at me. The gratitude in his eyes had faded, leaving only sarcasm. At that moment, my blood ran cold. But what's the use of repaying a favor? Philip has no choice. 2. The wedding vows kiss was a borrowed shot. On our wedding night, he got drunk, and we have been sleeping in separate rooms ever since. This is all my own fault. I don't blame anyone else. Until Philip's susceptible period broke out, I was forcibly injected with artificial pheromones by his father and sent to the room. It was a ridiculous night. After waking up, I dragged my almost falling apart limbs to apologize to him, but all I got in return was a suffocating kiss. "Don't apologize. I know it's not your fault." I hugged his neck with trembling hands and cried silently. After this incident, we tacitly tried to get along as a husband and wife. Although respect is greater than love, the thoughts in my heart are still nourished and alive. I started collecting Philip's favorite things that he had been forced to sell without his knowledge. Among them was a watch, which he had declared in front of everyone as his favorite, and he never took it off. I bought it back for double the price and gave it to Philip for his birthday. He stared at the watch number for a long time, then took me in his arms. "Thank you, Sean." I thought this momentary affection was the beginning of a change in the relationship. Philip even went to great lengths to adopt an alpha child, Vincent, to ensure the continuation of the relationship. You have to know that in this era when fertility rates have hit rock bottom, the combination of alpha and beta is strictly controlled. If there is no heir, they must be separated within 1 year and undergo pheromone matching separately. But now it seems that they were all illusions. I suppressed the discomfort in my throat with a bleak smile, got off the bus and went home. As soon as I opened the door, The kid rushed over impatiently. His two big eyes kept looking behind me. Father, you promised to read me a story tonight. I calmed down and picked up the cub. Father is busy. Can I read to you? Fortunately, the pheromones left by Philip yesterday were enough to soothe the cub, and it slept well all night. 3. I was woken up by the continuous notification sounds of my cell phone. Large transfers of varying amounts, and text messages about changes in fixed assets. I frowned and called my dad. Dad, what are you doing? My father laughed bitterly. Baby, Daddy is afraid that he can't protect you. With these, at least you can have peace of mind for the rest of your life. I opened my mouth and it took me a long time to say, I'm sorry. The beeping sound echoed in my ears. I lowered my head and gave the sleeping kid an apologetic kiss on his face, then walked out of the room and called Philip. No one answered the 3 calls. I could only call Travis and ask him to answer my call with Philip. Travis stammered and replied, Philip has been injected with an inhibitor and is resting. I quickly picked up the car keys and went downstairs. Okay, I'll go find him at the company. But just as he started the engine, Travis suddenly shouted, Ma'am, Philip is not in the office. I parked the car on the side of the road and turned on the navigation to lock the location sent by Travis. In an upscale residential area near the company. I bit the tip of my tongue until the smell of blood filled my mouth before I came to my senses and restarted the engine. A half-hour drive is enough time for me to cut my heart into pieces and then sew them back together. I was calm when someone knocked on the door. Philip, let's talk. The moment the door opened, I realized that I had overestimated myself. Philip, who was disheveled, made way. I forced myself to walk into the room and accidentally bumped into the corner of the table. It doesn't hurt. All the sharp edges in the room are covered with special sponges, and even the floor is covered with a thick layer of velvet carpet. The light yellow walls add to the warmth, but to me they are all unfamiliar. Philip closed the door and sat on the sofa opposite. Why are you here? My parents' affairs are more important. I put away my thoughts and pleaded in a low voice. It's my fault for getting married. It has nothing to do with my parents. Can you please let them live? You can do whatever you want to me. I can leave the house with nothing if we divorce. Philip's face suddenly turned cold, and after a while he sneered. Am I such an ungrateful person in your heart? Hearing this, I finally breathed a sigh of relief and shook my head quickly. I should have thanked him and left, but I couldn't help but say, You are in the susceptible period, so it would be more convenient for you to go home, doctor. I was interrupted before I could finish my words. Philip glanced at me, turned his head away and lay back, revealing his stretched zipper. I just want to spend time here. Go back soon. I can't help but think of the advice given by the physiology teacher, that the 2 genders AO will only spend their special period in the place where they feel most at ease. Therefore, this place where I have never been before makes Philip feel more at ease than home. As for who made him feel so at ease and when, I dare not think about it, and I am not qualified to ask. I forced a smile and left in embarrassment. For when I got back to the driving seat, I couldn't help but lean over the steering wheel and cry silently. Until the alarm rang, I calmed down and drove to the kindergarten. When I ran into the school, I saw the kid being held in the arms of a young man with a delicate face. I hurried forward to hold the cub in my arms and was about to thank him when I heard him say, Hello, ma'am. I'm Bradley, Philip's new assistant. No wonder I've never seen it. I nodded in understanding. Thank you, but why are you here? You have to know that except for Travis, all other assistants of Philip are only responsible for work. The strange feeling was soon confirmed. Bradley took out a watch from his bag and handed it to me. I'm very sorry, ma'am. I didn't collect my pheromones on the first day of registration, which caused trouble for Philip. This is the watch that Philip left behind. Today, Travis said you might not be free, so I volunteered to pick up the young master. I couldn't hear what was said afterwards. The highly compatible Omega, it turns out to be him. But even so, Philip still kept him. I laughed at myself and took the watch. Thank you for your hard work. I have something else to do. I will go back first. Please do as you please. Walking back to the car with difficulty, I bent down to put the baby into the safety seat, but I heard him ask, "Daddy, the watch smells good. Besides my father's pheromones, it also smells like plums." I froze where I was, absolutely certain that the plum scent was Bradley's pheromone. How long does it take to be placed close to the body to be contaminated with Omega's pheromones? I don't know, but Philip, who always carries a watch with him, knows. Beta Travis, who knows the importance of tables, also knows it. But they all chose to let it go. I froze in place, as if I understood what an exception meant. Pa! I came to my senses only after my phone fell to the ground and called a designated driver with trembling hands. On the way, I stared at the familiar number for a long time, but decided to wait until Philip's susceptible period was over before confessing directly. He wants freedom, and I am willing to leave with nothing, but I don't want to waste time on internal issues, and I don't want to be a stepping stone. As soon as I got off the car, the kid couldn't wait to hug my calf. "Daddy, the day after tomorrow is the baby's birthday. Will the father come back?" The day after tomorrow is the most difficult stage of the susceptible period. I couldn't guarantee it, so I just rubbed the baby's face and coaxed him to eat. But when I met his pitiful eyes before going to bed at night, I still softened my heart. At 10:30, I called Philip. "Can you come back the day after tomorrow?" A long sigh came from the other end of the phone. "I'll be back. It's the baby's birthday." 5. In the evening, Vincent went home carrying cake and toys. We never mentioned the previous conflict and played our respective roles perfectly to accompany the cub. The only thing that happened was when making a wish. "I hope to be with my father every birthday." I smiled, scraped off a bit of cream, and put it on the tip of the kid's nose without saying anything. But unexpectedly, my wrist tightened. Philip took my hand and drew a heart between the baby's eyebrows. I turned my head in surprise and bumped into Philip's eyes, which were warmed by the candlelight. Good. I almost believed it, but fortunately the conversation in the study woke me up in time. There is only a two-seater sofa in the study. I usually sit next to him. Philip stood up immediately as if he had touched something dirty, walked to the desk and sat down. My heart ached for a moment, and I put the watch on the table. "Bradley sent it." But Philip just nodded and made no move to put it back on. I continued to ask, "He's an Omega, and he's your assistant." Philip finally raised his head. "My father arranged for me to come here to study. But his father had also pushed people to Philip before, and none of them stayed, so it would be fine if he could replace them with Bradley." I just felt nauseous and almost vomited. After suppressing my nausea, I looked straight at Philip. "Philip, do you want to divorce me?" The pen in his hand fell, making a sharp sound. "Why do you ask?" Look, he didn't say he wanted to, nor did he say he didn't want to. But the general rule in the adult world is that if you don't refuse, it means you want it, which means you agree. I stood up and walked towards Philip, pushing the watch in front of him. Because I don't accept him as a special case, and I don't accept any third party. Philip took out a glasses cloth, wrapped the watch and put it in the drawer. "You think too much. That day will never come." After saying that, he stood up and left. My mind was dizzy, and I had some unrealistic expectations. I quickly stepped in front of Philip. "Today is the third day of the susceptible period." Philip lowered his eyes and raised his hand to tighten my collar. "Go to bed early. I have a big project during this period and I may have to work overtime. I will stay in the second bedroom." I walked stiffly back to the master bedroom and spent the night awake looking at the drawer full of artificial pheromones. I didn't go downstairs until Philip left, and I was so dazed that I couldn't even come back to my senses when the baby jumped into my arms. "Daddy, it's my father's pheromone." I smiled and moved closer to his raised hand and sniffed it. It smells so good." Dad used pheromones to soothe the baby again, right?" The cub left happily after getting the response. I walked slowly towards the dining table and carefully raised my hand to the tip of my nose. It would be nice if I could smell it. Unfortunately, there is only the smell of milk here, which makes me feel suffocated and uneasy. I frowned and pressed the back of my hand against my forehead. It was burning hot. Please call a doctor. Daddy. Before I could finish my words, darkness completely filled my vision. 6. When I opened my eyes again, the surroundings had changed. The only thing that remained unchanged was the dizzy head and the ever-rising feeling of nausea. I struggled to press the bell, and soon the butler Wesley led the doctor in. Where's the baby? Also, what's wrong with me? Wesley held my shoulders down. Madam, don't worry. The young master is waiting for you at home. As for the illness, please read this. As soon as he finished speaking, the doctor handed the report to me. It is initially suspected that Beta's secondary sex characteristics have developed lesions. Note: the effects of excessive artificial pheromones require further testing. My breathing quickened, and I reached out to Wesley without hesitation. Give me the phone. I got my phone and called Philip. What time will you be home today? Philip paused for a moment. If I have to work overtime, I'll do it as soon as possible. I nodded and wanted to tell him the news, but all I could hear was the echo of beep. It's okay. I'll tell you the same thing when he comes back. I turned my phone ringtone to the highest setting, turned to look at the doctor, and asked skillfully, Next, we need to replenish nutrients, right? The doctor nodded and quickly called a nurse to give me an infusion. I watched the milky white liquid being input into my body bit by bit. There was silence in my ears and I gradually fell asleep. I just didn't expect that a phone call from a friend would make me feel like I was falling into an icy cave. Baby, why didn't you attend the dinner with Philip today? Isn't Beta the favorite in their family? My eyebrows were furrowed. I'm in the hospital. What happened? There was a noticeable silence on the other end of the phone, so I couldn't help but ask, what happened? My friend coughed lightly. Look at the green bubbles. The chat interface only has one picture. I clicked it with trembling hands and enlarged it. There was a pair of thin white hands in Philip's arms, and the owner was Bradley. Looking a little further ahead, a new watch is being flaunted on the wrist that matches the suit perfectly. I turned off my phone, leaving the room alone in darkness. 7. It was 1 o'clock in the morning when the lights in the ward came on again. I looked at Philip and pointed my index finger at my left wrist. Please give me back my watch, Philip. He froze in the doorway, his knuckles accidentally touching the light switch. In the darkness and silence, I heard the answer. Send it for maintenance. In 2 days. I interrupted quietly. I just got it back from maintenance last week. I raised the corners of my lips. I'm actually very easy to fool, really. But why did you choose the one that is the easiest to expose among so many excuses you gave me? Philip didn't say anything, and he could hear footsteps getting closer and closer. I just felt exhausted physically and mentally, and I unconsciously bent my back and covered my eyes with my hands. Let's get a divorce, Philip. Let's get a divorce. I let you go. The hand hanging above his head never came down. Philip slammed the door and left without saying a word. I stared out the window for a long while, then called my parents and got the following reply. Go home, Sean. I took a deep breath and looked up the phone number of the Liu family's legal team. Help me draw up a divorce agreement. I don't want a penny, but I want to take the cub with me. For days after I sent the divorce agreement to Philip's desk, I received a reply. He asked me to have a detailed discussion at a private restaurant. I went there as scheduled, but what greeted me was a brand new agreement. I frowned and flipped through it quickly. Philip made important changes. The custody of Vincent belongs to Philip. The time of public disclosure is decided by Philip. I sneered and threw the agreement in front of Philip. Everything else can be discussed later, but the custody of Vincent must belong to me. But Philip just tapped the table twice with his knuckles, and Travis stood up. His eyes locked onto my lower abdomen. Philip is willing to pay for your treatment after knowing the test results, which is already a great favor to you. Besides, the young master is an alpha with genetic defects. He needs Philip's pheromones to calm him before the operation, and you are only a beta. I stared at Philip. I want to talk to you alone. Travis wanted to say more when he saw this, but finally left at Philip's signal. I threw the new agreement into Philip's hands. I want custody. He took out a cigarette and held it between his fingers, but did not light it. Sean, you have to think about the baby too. It's best for him to stay with me and be comforted. Besides, you don't want to lose him, do you? After he finished speaking, Philip glanced at my lower abdomen calmly. I was so angry that I was shaking all over, but I had to admit that this was the most responsible choice for the cub. 7 days a week, for days I stay with you to be comforted, and the remaining 3 days I stay with you. This is my bottom line. The cigarette paper was crumpled, and the tobacco leaves were scattered all over the table. Philip nodded gently. Okay. The day after tomorrow, I'll bring the new agreement and meet you at the divorce registry. I suddenly remembered something. When did you know the test results? Philip tore up the agreement. You are in our hospital. The doctor notified me as soon as the report came out. It suddenly dawned on me that even after learning the test results, he still brought Omega to the banquet with great fanfare. My only line of defense collapsed completely, and I escaped from the room before I lost my composure. I signed the new agreement with huge dark circles under my eyes. In a world without a cooling-off period, it only took us 10 minutes to complete the divorce. I looked at the blurry road and said, I will pack up and move out today. My son will leave with me too. Can you arrange for someone to pick him up on Sunday night? Philip nodded and strode towards the car. It was not until the luxury car drove away that I came to my senses and called a taxi back to the villa. Fortunately, the kid was still in school, giving me enough time to organize the words to explain to him. Unfortunately, when I was packing my luggage, I found that many things were missing. Actually, it's better to lose it. With trembling hands, I took out the artificial pheromones from the cabinet and threw them into the trash can along with several shredded photos. Sharing the same bed for 3 years, but always having different dreams. I laughed at myself and didn't look back. Everything went well, except that I felt conflicted after taking the baby back to my premarital home. Before I could explain, the kid rubbed my face. My father told me that the feng shui of our house had been destroyed and that it had to be demolished. I had no choice but to ask my dad to take me out first, and my father also said, this house was designed by a master his father hired, and Wesley and his family never dared to change even a little bit. Only I have changed the layout of the garden and planted an endless summer. My heart ached and I quickly interrupted the topic. Daddy knows, but now it's time for the baby to eat and sleep. The cub walked obediently to the dining table. A good night's sleep. But the next day, just after I sent my kid to kindergarten, I received a financial news alert. Breaking news. The wedding house was demolished overnight. I stared at the ruins on the picture for a moment, then raised my hand to cross out the information. That's not my home anymore. I sighed and drove to the mall to replenish the clothes I lost before the move. But after visiting several stores, I still couldn't find a suitable one. I was thinking about changing the mall when I heard a discussion. There's a new Brand X on the 4th floor? Brand X? This is the brand I customized the most before. It is really comfortable to wear. I raised my eyebrows and followed the sign all the way up. But I didn't expect to see Bradley as soon as I entered the store. He also had a new shirt draped over his forearm, in Philip's size. 9. I just pretended I was blind and walked to the other side of the shelf. Unexpectedly, Bradley came over. Sean, long time no see. Couldn't help but frown. Hearing this name, Bradley knew that Philip and I were divorced. But we agreed not to make it public for now. I scoffed and walked right past Bradley. I thought that deliberately ignoring me would be enough to embarrass him and stop him from coming closer. But Bradley didn't care and came up to me again. I chose one and he took the same one. Anger suddenly rose in my heart, and I said in a bad tone, Bradley, can you please stay away from me? You smell so bad. It's unpleasant to the touch. I suppressed my nausea, picked up my shirt, and walked quickly to the cashier. But before I could finish paying, my cell phone rang. Sean, the watch has been serviced and is confirmed to have no odor. When would it be convenient for you to pick it up? I frowned and refused. Sorry, you can just contact Assistant Philip to pick it up. Without waiting for his answer, I hung up. Suddenly, a reply came from beside him. Don't worry, Sean. I'll pick up the watch. Also, when is it convenient for you on Sunday? I will pick up Yun Qing. This lousy watch can do whatever he wants, but why should he lay a hand on the kid? My face suddenly turned cold and I said viciously, "Roll." After saying that, I turned around and left with the shopping bags. But before I went out, my stomach suddenly started to ache. Could it be that the sudden loss of control of emotions had an impact? My heart skipped a beat and I quickened my pace towards the underground garage. But as soon as I reached the second floor below ground, the abdominal pain became more and more severe, my legs became weak, and I almost knelt down. Fortunately, someone pulled me up in time. I looked along the slender white wrist. It was Bradley, and he let go of her hand with a smile. I subconsciously protected my lower abdomen. My knees ached, and Bradley's invitation echoed in the garage. "Sean, Philip wants to see you." 10. 7 or 8 alpha guys responded and I had no chance to refuse. I endured the pain and got into the car. I carefully put my hands in my pockets and fumbled to press the power button to quickly sound the alarm. But the phone seemed dead and had no response. I looked up at the changing scenery outside the car window, my mind in a mess. Is there still a chance to escape? Who is Bradley and what is his relationship with Philip's father? Soon I got the answer. Philip's father, lower your jaw. Sit. I stood aside cautiously without sitting down. The moment his cane hit the ground, 2 bodyguards came forward and forced me to sit on the wooden sofa. I remember you were a very obedient child when you first married Philip. His cold eyes looked down. Unfortunately, things changed later. You refused to use artificial pheromones to appease Philip, causing his susceptible period to get out of control more and more. Do you know how much damage an alpha who can't control himself can cause to the company's image? Not to mention the adopted child. How did he know that I threw away most of the artificial pheromones he sent me? My pupils suddenly shrank, and I looked in horror as Bradley slowly and kindly poured tea for him. Sean, you may not know this, but I'm the youngest child of the Sure family, an A-rank Omega, and I have an 85% match with Shinji, a highly matched AO combination, not to mention that Omega is young Master Sure who is twice as strong as Lu. Even a fool knows how to choose. I felt a chill in my heart and involuntarily arched my back to cover my abdomen. But the next second, I was held up by the bodyguards. Bradley chuckled from behind. Don't worry, Sean. It's just a minor surgery to remove the diseased secondary sex characteristics. The worst consequence is organ failure and early death. These 2 lunatics really want me to die. I didn't care about anything else and turned around and cursed. But the pain in the back of my neck made me unable to speak anymore. When I opened my eyes again, I was tied to the operating table, and a person in dark green surgical gown was holding up an injection. It's an anesthetic. No, it will hurt. I tried my best to break free from the restraints. What happened instead was that the arm swallowed the needle tip and the liquid scale in the tube slowly decreased. My consciousness gradually blurred, and the piercing alarm sounded over the buzzing sound. Master, you can't come in here. Master, please go back. Master, this is also for your own good. The noisy voices ended with a roar. Get away from me. The shackles on my body loosened, and I fell into a familiar embrace. It's okay. Everything will be fine when you wake up. I couldn't open my eyes to look at Philip. I just remember that my neck was wet before I lost consciousness. 11. The moment I came to, I hurriedly lifted my clothes. There were no knife marks and my stomach didn't hurt anymore. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief and propped up my weak body to get out of bed. But after taking 2 steps with the help of the wardrobe, he fell back to the bed uncontrollably. I looked at the culprit, which was a sliding cabinet door that was now wide open, revealing a variety of fabrics. The most eye-catching thing is a red and green floral shirt. It looks familiar no matter how I look at it. But before I could take it down to check, Philip pushed the door open and walked in. Are you feeling uncomfortable anywhere else? I shook my head subconsciously, avoiding his hand and stepping back. Philip turned pale and closed the cabinet door. I'm glad you're okay. I'm sorry that my problem affected you. I couldn't help but think of everything that happened before, and glared at him fiercely. "Philip, it's none of my business who you're with. Can you please keep your dad and Bradley in check? You're so decisive in divorcing me, what's wrong? Did the high-matching Omega make you soft-hearted?" I laughed at myself and continued to stab him with my gun and stick. "Stop bothering me. You all make me sick." Philip lowered his head so his expression could not be seen clearly, and his voice was inexplicably hoarse. "Okay, I understand. It's obviously a happy thing, but my heart aches." I stopped talking and let the silence fill the room. Fortunately, the knock on the door broke the awkwardness in time. "Philip, the medicine is here." Philip opened the door and Travis handed me the medicine and the report. I looked at the familiar blue liquid in the tube. Why this again? This special medicine was only used in the second year of my marriage when I felt inexplicable pain all over my body. Philip sighed and pointed to a line on the report for me to look at. "For abdominal pain caused by the lesion, it is recommended to supplement alpha pheromone daily to balance it." I glanced at Philip and only now realized that this was actually Philip's pheromone extract. I pursed my lips and counted the potions in front of me. There was only enough for 1 week. But I just told Philip to get away. I cleared my throat and looked over at Philip. But before I could open my mouth, he answered first. "This is also my responsibility. Don't worry. I will have people deliver medicines to you regularly." I finally felt relieved, and immediately drank a tube of medicine, and thanked him softly. "Thank you. I'm leaving now." Philip murmured okay, and followed closely behind me. When I walked out of the bedroom, I realized that this was the small apartment he had never told me about. I pinched my palms hard and left faster. Fortunately, there were no accidents on the way home. I slammed the door shut, curled up on the sofa, called my mother, and asked her to help pick up the cub. While waiting, I kept thinking about a question. If he keeps in touch with Philip through the potion for a long time, he will definitely get into trouble again. Philip's father and Bradley are not reasonable people. I rubbed my brows and thought to myself, it would be nice if there was something that could replace it. Wait, alternative. My eyes lit up and 5 words popped up in my mind. Artificial pheromones. I did what I said and immediately opened my phone to make an appointment at the pheromone department of a tertiary hospital. But the next day, when I brought this idea up to my doctor, she said, "Sean, I think you should get a test first." 12. The doctor held the report with a serious expression. "How many doses of artificial pheromones have you injected in the past?" I was stunned and thought carefully. Apart from the 50 milliliters artificial pheromone injection on the wedding night, I had used it twice during the susceptible period before being discovered by Philip. It's only 80 milliliters in total. The doctor sighed. "Even if it is the type with the lowest side effects, beta's lifetime limit is only 100 milliliters. According to the examination report, you have developed lesions of secondary sexual characteristics. I have learned that beta, as the most common existence, has no pheromones and no glands. But this does not mean that there is no secondary sexual characteristics in the body. On the contrary, the secondary sexual characteristics in beta's body are immature organs and are quite fragile and cannot withstand the slightest storm." She looked at me with pity and continued, "Once the disease is complete, the patient may suffer from genetic defects and rely on expensive drugs to survive, or organ failure and early death." There was a buzzing in my ears and my face turned pale. "Is there a cure?" She picked up the blue potion and glanced at my stomach. "I'm sorry, Sean, but as long as you keep using this alpha's pheromone extract, there shouldn't be any major problems." I took a deep breath and asked, "How long do you want to keep using it? Can you switch to another alpha?" The doctor gave me a disapproving look. "At least 5 years. If you want to change people, Sean, please follow me." I followed her puzzledly all the way to the sterile extraction room. Through the one-way glass, I clearly saw the nurse pick up a needle about 6 centimeters long and 0.3 millimeters thick and insert it into the bound strange alpha gland, slowly completing the extraction. The doctor whispered, "Anesthesia will affect the extraction results." The strange alpha struggled in pain. So this is how Philip extracted me after he discovered I was secretly using artificial pheromones. Why? I'm just a beta who's trying to repay a favor and can do nothing for him. I dare not think too deeply about it, let alone ask for an answer. Has Sean seen the extraction process, but still insists on a replacement? You should protect yourself more. That's what an alpha like that deserves. Looking at her gritting her teeth, I finally understood that she thought I was forced. Unfortunately not. I smiled bitterly and continued to ask about changing people, and finally got the answer that it was possible to change, but I had to wait until the next 8 months were over. After making the decision, I left the hospital and called Philip on the way to renegotiate the medication. But I found that no one answered the call. I was about to turn off the screen when I received a strange text message. Sean, you lose. Philip is mine. It is followed by a URL. I pressed delete without hesitation, but found that the other party sent 99 plus text messages like crazy. You are sick, Bradley. My father called. We are going to hold a shareholders meeting tomorrow. They turned against us and wanted to replace the executive director. Don't worry, at worst we can retire early with the dividends. I gritted my teeth and replied, good. No way, how could I not care? This is all my father's hard work. Our family holds 47% of the shares, and all shareholders, both large and small, have always been stable and supportive of my father, but now, this cannot go on. I gritted my teeth and continued to call Philip. The result was that the red number representing missed calls increased from 29 to 72, which was Philip's personal account that posted the divorce news. I was powerless to cover my eyes. How could I forget? The divorce agreement was clearly written and the time of disclosure was decided by Philip. 13. I returned home in silence and tried to raise the cash flow to buy shares, but by the time the market closed, I had only bought 0.3%. I stayed up all night holding the cub, preparing for the worst. But before leaving, the usually obedient kid started to make a fuss. Daddy, please take me there, please. I squatted down helplessly, ready to coax him. But he hugged her arms. Father said that if Daddy has to go to the company while he's away, then I, as the only alpha in the family, will have to take on the responsibility and stay by Daddy's side to protect him. I was stunned for a moment. Then I came to my senses and took him out. Okay, Daddy, bring the little bodyguard along. After arriving at the company, I placed the cub in the lounge. But as soon as I turned around, the little tail came up to me again. He opened his backpack, pulled out several pieces of paper and stuffed them into my hands. My eyes widened. Philip voluntarily donated 4.7% of Lou Group's shares to Vincent. August 10, 2076. 10 days before the susceptible period breaks out. I suddenly don't understand. But the shareholders' meeting was about to begin, and I didn't have time to delve into it, so I went to the meeting room with the equity transfer document. I rushed back to the lounge and called Philip to thank him. Before the call was connected, Travis called first. Ma'am, something happened to Philip. I haven't been able to contact Philip since I returned to the old house yesterday at noon. I wanted to say just force your way in and bring Philip back. But when the words reached his throat, he swallowed them back. In what capacity? Besides, it is easy to figure out the reason why Philip was controlled. It was nothing more than Philip's father wanted to match him and Bradley. I hung up the phone indifferently. Suddenly, my father's voice rang out from behind me. Sean, Dad has contacted a security company. Do you think 20 alpha bodyguards are enough? I pointed at myself in disbelief. Dad, Philip and I are divorcing, and he's about to. Before he could finish his words, he was caught off guard by the agreement his father handed over. The first page was a letter of guarantee that Philip had signed 3 years ago. The content was brief, in which he promised to be good to me and love only me, and that if we divorced, he would leave the house with nothing. The second page is the 27% equity transfer agreement, which will take effect immediately once I sign it. I closed the paper. 20 more bodyguards. Let's go now. This time, I'm going to ask Philip myself. 14. After picking up Travis, I led a group of people straight to the old house. But before we could rush through the iron gate, the ambulance rushed in first. I hurriedly stepped on the accelerator and followed closely behind. Unexpectedly, when I got out of the car, I saw Bradley, twitching all over, being carried out by the servants. I was startled and went upstairs. Just as he approached the elevator, he was stopped by Philip's father and his men. "It's all because of you, this unlucky guy, that Philip won't listen to me. Do you know that only AO combination is the most perfect? You betas should die." His eyes were bloodshot and looked a little crazy. "It seems like there is a lot of story, but I have no intention of exploring it. Please don't delay me from looking for someone." My face turned cold. I waved behind me, and several bodyguards rushed over. Travis even added fuel to the fire. "Philip, I have disclosed the information about Schur's tax evasion as Philip requested." He almost couldn't catch his breath. Right now, I grabbed his crutches and threw them on the ground and rushed into the elevator while he was unsteady on his feet. I strode to Philip's door and knocked 3 times. "It's me, Sean. Open the door." The door lock made a sound and the smell of blood filled my nose. I took a breath and flicked the light switch. Philip was biting his arm tightly and backing away. My heart ached and I raised my hand to stop him. But I heard him say, "Don't come over here. I can't control myself anymore, wife." I poured more than 20 kinds of inhibitors from my bag onto the bed. "Can you come over?" Philip choked and took 2 steps towards me. "It's no use. I've already called you." I paused, then quickly walked over to him. "What's wrong with Bradley?" It was clearly just a casual question, but Philip's eyebrows drooped after hearing it, and he felt very aggrieved. "You only care about him, not me." I smiled wryly. "Ex-husband, hurry up and tell me, or I'll throw you in the hospital and leave." Philip's spirits became even more depressed. "He is in fever period. I can only attack him with pheromones." But I was also stimulated into a susceptible period. After saying that, he came closer to me and lowered his head. "It's uncomfortable." I was soft-hearted and touched the buckle of his belt. "Well, once and then to the hospital." But the next second, he held my wrists together. "No, he installed surveillance cameras at work and home to monitor me. Let's go home." I couldn't help but think of the flattened wedding house. Could it be? Philip nodded, clenching his cheek as he put on his loose clothing. "When did you find out?" The answer came from the wind. "The day I found out that he asked you to use artificial pheromones regularly." 15. Philip asked Travis to turn around and go back to the small apartment they had been in before. As soon as he entered the door, Philip couldn't wait to go into the master bedroom. When I chased him in, he was busy like a worker bee, constantly going back and forth between the closet and the bed. Pieces of clothes of varying thickness were carefully piled up and formed a small circle in the middle of the bed. The scientific name for this behavior is nesting. It occurs when the alpha is extremely in love with his partner but cannot be comforted. I took 2 steps forward in disbelief and pulled out the red and green floral shirt that I had only worn once. "It's really mine, and the rest are all mine too. All the clothes that were lost on the day of moving are hidden here." I couldn't help but glare at Philip. Just one look and Philip started to shed tears. "Honey, I'm sorry. My wife doesn't like me. I am the most pitiful alpha. No one wants it, little cabbage. The ground is yellow." I laughed out of anger and went up to him and pinched his cheek. "Don't scream. Explain it to me clearly from beginning to end." Philip rubbed my palm, his eyes full of affection. "You must have forgotten." What did I forget? Before I could react, Philip put the familiar watch on me. 16.
No. Al 206-91225.
Philip pointed to the number. "I carved it myself, the day I first met you." But the last time I met Philip was in 2073, when he had just returned to China. And I remember that day very clearly. It was a Christmas party organized by the department, and Philip did not attend. I quickly told him my doubts. Philip shook his head. "No, it was Christmas 4 years ago. I was diagnosed with a genetic disease and was kicked out of the house. When you were desperate, you gave me the most valuable watch on your body. But I'm sorry, I sold it at the end of the treatment. I'm not angry, on the contrary. I'm glad that this watch can help him. But there is one thing I don't understand. Philip, Why didn't you tell me the truth when you came back? He patted the empty nest. I came back to seize power. My future is uncertain. What right do I have to get involved with you? I couldn't stop feeling sour in my heart, so I just lay down in the nest and was hugged by him. Philip bent down and kissed me between the eyebrows. I have been buying up shares. The kid is adopted and has a genetic disease. I knew he would take action sooner or later, but I didn't expect that he would start with you and even secretly instigate other shareholders of Lu Corporation to defect. I can only play along and let you go first. Turns out it's that simple. But that doesn't mean I'm not angry. I snorted coldly, opened Philip's eyes, and left the nest. Okay, I get it, you stay here. Philip opened his eyes wide in shock, knelt down in front of me pitifully, and grabbed my clothes. Honey, forgive me. I raised my eyebrows and said nothing. He became even more excited. How about remarrying? I smiled and pried open his fingers. No. His eyes instantly turned red, and little pearls flowed out like money. Can you lend me your wife's coats? They all smell bad. I took a breath, took off my coat with my ears red, and walked out of the bedroom. 17. But I didn't expect that Philip's pseudo-susceptibility period would become more and more severe. At 5 in the morning, I woke up because I had to go to the bathroom. When I opened my eyes, I saw Philip squatting next to me holding my underwear. His eyes were red, and he took the initiative to put his head in my palm. Honey, please touch me, please. In the 3 years I've known Philip, I've never seen him like this. I was so scared that I raised my hand and slapped him on the head. Philip raised his head suddenly, pointed at his face with shining eyes. Here too. I'm scared. I'm really scared. He pushed Philip away with all his strength and moved to the side. It would have been better if he didn't leave. As soon as he moved away, Philip's eyes were red. Don't go, honey. I was wrong. No, my ex-husband, what are you going to do? Soon I got the answer. Philip stood up and showed me his baby-like body in all its glory. He knelt down obediently, bent down, and felt a hot and wet touch flash across his ankles. Clean, my wife. Please don't leave me. I washed my hands 100 times after being touched by my omega. If my wife is not satisfied, I will go for skin grafting tomorrow. The almost sobbing plea almost made my soul leave my body. Are all nesting alphas like this? But I don't have the heart to care about this now. I was so anxious that I kicked Philip in the chest and said fiercely, "Go away." As soon as the shackles loosened, I immediately stood up and walked towards the toilet. But Philip was like a sticky candy. He kept clinging to me and wouldn't let me close the door. I will die if I can't see my wife. It's not certain whether he will live or die, but if I don't close the shop, it will be a real social demise. Not caring about anything else, I pushed Philip away and locked the door. Call. But I never expected that Philip would carefully knock on the door and ask, "Can I help my wife hold her back?" Not good. All crooked. I screamed silently, "Philip, are you a dog?" This speculation was soon verified. When I came out after taking another shower, the bed, which had been tidy, was now a mess. It was piled high with Philip's own clothes, leaving barely enough space for me to sleep. I gritted my teeth and looked at Philip. "What are you doing?" Philip cried first. He raised his hands and hugged me tightly, burying his prickly head in my shoulder and rubbing it back and forth. His voice was sticky. "The bed is too small. Come sleep with me." Okay. I was heartless and said, "No." But as soon as he finished speaking, his body flew into the air. Before I could even flutter my feet, I was stuffed into the nest and covered by his clothes. "Philip, I'm telling you, you're screwed." Before I could finish my words, Philip raised his hand to cover my mouth and looked around twice with a furtive look. "Don't talk, wife. Someone will snatch you away." I'm scared. I was so angry that I bit the soft flesh on his palm, carrying with me all the anger I had been feeling for that period of time. Regardless, the blood didn't stop oozing out. I finally let go when I was exhausted. But Philip didn't say a word. He just urged me to put his hand into my mouth. Still biting. I was so soft-hearted that the tears I had been holding back for a long time finally fell, and I cursed incoherently. Get as far away as you can. Who wants to touch you? Philip heaved a sigh of relief, turned around and took out a warm towel to wipe my face, and finally knelt on the ground with a plop. Then my wife goes to sleep, and I will watch over you. I'm too lazy to bother with him anymore. I'll have plenty of time to deal with him later anyway. Teen. Fortunately, Philip's pseudo-susceptibility period ended on the third day. He put on his suit and put the equity transfer agreement next to me. Sean, sign it. I didn't refuse this time and quickly wrote my name on the paper. I really can't wait to see the expression on Philip's scumbag dad's face. Unfortunately, he suffered a stroke after learning that the relevant departments had thoroughly confirmed that the Schur family had evaded taxes and that the 40 small projects in which he had led the investment had fallen through. Philip, out of filial piety, sent him to a nursing home. I heard that the electric shock therapy there is particularly useful. As for me, of course, at the new round of shareholders meeting, I joined forces with several small shareholders who had benefited from the company to formally appoint Philip as the executive general manager. Everything is back on track, except for one thing. Philip is really annoying. He asks me 3 times a day when they can get back together. I looked down at my body, which was gradually changing. Well, it depends on your performance. Fool.